3, 2, 1.
Here we go!
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Geographic, and I'll be your host for today. We are getting into October. We have left September in the rearview mirror. I think we had somewhere around 40 live events during the month of September to kick off the school year. And October is going to be jam-packed as well. One of the big themes we have coming up is space exploration. So if you visit our website, exploringbytheseat.com, under events, you will find our space exploration event series. We have a lot of cool events coming your way. So check that out, and hopefully you can join some of those with us this month. All right, so today we are going to reconnect, I guess, with our friend, oceanographer and National Geographic explorer, Katlin Bowman Adamczyk. She was gearing up for a time in the field on the research vessel Kilo Moana, which is kind of a big waterplane area, twin hull ship operated by the US Navy and the University of Hawaii Marine Center. So one thing you should know about expeditions is they don't always go as planned. I think if you were out in the field and you had a perfect expedition, it's probably a dream. You'd have to check yourself, make sure you're awake, because expeditions are complicated. There's technology, lots of people to organize, and they don't always go as planned. So we're going to spend a little time with Katlin today. We're going to learn a little bit about what happened and learn a little bit about the cool things she does exploring our oceans. So let's get Katlin in here with us right now. Hey, Katlin, how are you?
Hi, everybody. I'm doing well.
Good. It's great to have you with us today. Not 100% where we planned, but we're going to get to that and talk a little bit about why maybe things happen sometimes during expeditions.
Absolutely. So I was planning on joining you guys from the middle of the Pacific Ocean, but as Joe mentioned, our vessel unfortunately broke down. So instead, I'm joining you from my home in Santa Cruz, California. And today I wanted to tell you a little bit about my job. I'll tell you about the expedition that I was on. We're still going to do a virtual field trip of the Kilo Moana. So I recorded a little video of what it looks like to live on a research boat. And then I'm going to show you a couple of my favorite tools that we use to explore the deep ocean. So I work at the Global Marine Minerals Lab, which is part of the United States Geological Survey. And my job is to study rocks that are found on the seafloor. Rocks like manganese nodules, which are up here on the top left, and chimneys, which are on the top right. And maybe you've played with a crystal growing kit like the one pictured here. And the way that this kit works is you have a solid powder and you pour it into some water, and then that powder completely disappears. It dissolves into the water. And then you have something called a little seed, a little hard piece of plastic or some material that you put in the cup. And over time, you get a crystal that grows on that seed. And what's happening in that cup is the dissolved elements, that powder that disappeared in the water, starts to precipitate out. So it becomes a solid. It grabs onto the seed that you put in the glass, and it grows these really beautiful crystals. Something similar is actually happening in the deep ocean. So seawater has a bunch of dissolved elements, just like this dissolved powder. There are all these dissolved elements in seawater, and when they find a seed in the deep ocean, they can start to grow just like this crystal kit. It takes a lot longer. So I've never played with one of these. You'll have to let me know if you guys have. I think you can grow a crystal in about a week. On the seafloor, it can take millions and millions of years to grow a rock that would fit in the palm of your hand. So it's a much slower process, but same concepts. This is one of my favorite types of rocks to study on the seafloor. This is a hydrothermal vent chimney, a photo that we took on an expedition last summer near the Galapagos Islands. These are really special rocks that form where there's hot vent fluid coming out of the seafloor, and that fluid has the dissolved elements, dissolved metals, and they precipitate out, so they come back into solid phase, forming these beautiful structures that we call chimneys. And if we zoom in on this chimney, we can see that it's filled with different life forms. So oftentimes when you're exploring the deep ocean, the bottom's really muddy. You might see some cucumbers. There's lots of worms in the mud that you can't see. But the animals are kind of spread out in the deep ocean because there's not a lot of food. But when you get to these vent chimneys, these really special rocks in the deep ocean, you see a lot of life clustered together. So in this photo, if you see this kind of oblong thing, that's a mussel. All of these pom-pom looking things are part of different worms. So the worm uses those pom-pom tentacles to capture food from the water. And then we have one of my favorite deep sea animals, the squat lobster. But if you look in the background, you see those little white pom-poms everywhere. So deep sea rocks can actually be really important ecosystems in the deep ocean. The rock that we were studying last month in Hawaii on the Kilo Moana is called a nodule. This is very similar to that crystal growing kit where you have a seed. And so on the right is a photo of a nodule about the size of a golf ball. And I used this special saw to cut the rocks in half. And so when I cut that nodule in half, in the middle, you can see some little pebbles. That's the seed. And then all of these brown layers around the seed are minerals that have precipitated, so gone from dissolved to solid, just like that crystal kit. So these are the types of rocks that we wanted to study out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So in September, my team and I flew from California all the way out to the Hawaiian Islands. And we were working on a special research vessel called the RV Kilo Moana. And so the way we do this type of work is we first have to pack up and ship all of our gear out to meet the vessel. So this is a video of us loading. We shipped a whole entire container of gear. We have some bigger equipment that we use to grab mud from the seafloor. And then we have all these coolers and boxes, and those are filled with all of the supplies we need to work on board. So that rock saw you saw in the last slide, I actually packed it, shipped it to Hawaii, and set it up on the vessel so we can cut the rocks in half. And so we were in port, we got everything set up, we were all ready to go, and we left in the morning. This is a nice video of us leaving port in Honolulu, Hawaii, and we got about 50 miles offshore, and then we heard an alarm go off and people kind of running around, and it turns out that some of the generators that make power on the vessel weren't working anymore. So we still had our two main generators, but we didn't have any backups, which is not safe when you're working far offshore. So unfortunately, we had to turn around and come back into port. So things don't always go as planned. That's part of exploration. It can feel pretty disappointing because you're excited to do this work and you put all this energy and you get yourself there and you set everything up and then you have to take it home. But it happens. It's not the first time this has happened to me. Just like your car battery might die or you have to take the car into the shop and get it fixed. Boats break too. So these things happen, and maybe at the end of the year, we'll get to go back out and finish this project, or we might have to wait until 2025. So being an explorer sometimes requires a lot of patience. Do you guys want to see a little tour of the boat? All right, so this is what the inside of the Kilo Moana looks like. I think it all looks the same. I got very lost for the first few days that I was on board trying to figure out which hallway and which door to go into. But now we're going to take a walk down into the galley, which is where we eat. So we have wonderful cooks on board that make us 3 meals a day. It kind of looks like a school cafeteria. So we go get whatever food we want. That's Annie. There's lots of snacks on board, which is great because sometimes we work late or long hours. Those are my friends in one of the control rooms on the vessel. And then the main deck of the vessel has a lot of different laboratory spaces. So machines that make water, fume hoods for working with chemicals. This is my workstation. We had lots of microscopes on board. That's not a real sample. If we go out on the back deck, we have some bigger equipment. So that scoop looking thing can collect mud from the seafloor. This is a tool that we use to collect water samples. Then we're going to go back into the vessel and I'll show you what the rooms look like. So I got to share a room with my friend Hope, who's working at the desk there. We sleep in bunk beds. It feels a lot like a summer camp. And then we have a bathroom that we share with a couple girls next door. There's multiple levels, so lots of stairs and ladders on the vessel. One of my favorite parts about being at sea is you could just go to the end of the hallway, open a door, and then all of a sudden you're outside. You're surrounded by nothing but ocean. It's a really beautiful experience. I'll take you up one more deck. These were some fun things that were covered so we don't bump our toes. That big spool of wire is used to put things over the side. This is one of the highest decks on the ship. Oh, and one last thing. So when we're studying the deep ocean's really cold and dark. And so we have this special van on board that's also cold and dark. So when we bring up our samples, we can have this room nice and chilly and nice and dark so we don't scare any of the animals that might be hiding in the mud. Right. And so I wanted to finish by showing you a couple of the cool tools that I use to study the deep ocean. If you've ever gone swimming in the ocean, or maybe you know someone that's gone scuba diving, as a human, you're only able to explore this very small top layer of the ocean. So the deeper you go in the ocean, the more pressure there is. The region of the ocean that I work in is this really deep abyssal part of the ocean. So thousands of meters deep. It's way too deep for humans to scuba dive or swim down to. And so we have to use different tools to access the seafloor. So I'm going to show you a few of my favorites. The tools that we were going to use on our Hawaii cruise are this box core. And so there's a wire attached here. This is me pulling the A-frame out. So we send this package all the way down to the seafloor. There's a box in the middle that closes in on the seafloor and picks up a bunch of mud for us. And then we also can use these coring tools. So this big, in the bottom picture, this big long tube is really, really heavy. And we send it all the way down to the seafloor and it sinks into the mud. And then it pulls up this big long tube of sediment. So on the left is a picture of one of those tubes of sediment that's cut in half. And we can see all these different layers. So we have brown at the top, we have some black and white in the middle, and then some gray. And so we study these different layers of sediment to look and understand how things have changed through time. So we're interested in rocks on the seafloor, but we look at the whole environment there, collecting mud as well. And then the video on the right is this really cool library that we have in our center. All of those tubes on the shelves in there are filled with sediment cores from all over the world. So when we're done with our sediment core, we put it in the library. If anyone wants a piece of that sediment, they can kind of look and see what's in our library, check out a sediment core, and we can send them a sample so we can share this information that we collect from the deep sea. Another tool we use is called an AUV, or autonomous underwater vehicle. This is AUV Sentry from Woods Hole Oceanographic going for a ride in the Pacific a couple years ago. This is a cool tool that has sensors on the bottom, so we can do some mapping, we can collect temperature data, but it also has a computer inside, so we can program Sentry and basically set up a mission. So Sentry, we want you to map this part of the seafloor, and it has enough battery power for about 20 hours. And we just put Sentry in the water, we let it swim and do its thing, we pick it up when it's done, offload the data, and recharge the batteries. I'm going to show you a map that Sentry made for us a couple years ago in the North Pacific Ocean. And the first thing you see is this blue square. So if we zoomed in on a really small piece of the seafloor, about a mile of seafloor, the type of map that we can create with a satellite just looks like that blue square, because the satellite's all the way in space and we're trying to look at the deep ocean. And so we don't really see much. And then you see this kind of blurry, pixelated brown image. This is a map that we can make from a vessel, from a ship. The vessel is still pretty far from the seafloor because the ocean's really deep. So the vessel can be miles away from the seafloor that it's trying to image. So it looks kind of pixelated and blurry. But what Sentry can do, the colored map that you see, there's all these different lines and there's a couple different mounds. Sentry flies really close to the seafloor, so within 5 meters of the seafloor, and that means it can make these really high resolution maps. You can think of it kind of like zooming in with a camera lens. If you zoom in, you're going to see a lot more compared to being zoomed out all the way in space. So Sentry is a really cool tool that we get to use. Sometimes we use human-operated vehicles. This is HOV Alvin, which is also from Woods Hole Oceanographic. This kind of metal sphere that you see in the middle of the submarine holds 3 humans. So the blue circle in the middle is covering a window, and that's the window that the pilot looks out of. And then the other 2 blue circles are windows, one for me and one for my friend. So we have 2 scientists in the submarine and 1 pilot. And Alvin can stay down for about 8 hours. So the picture on the right, they pick the submarine up, they put it in the ocean, we drop down to the seafloor, and we have a day to go exploring. And behind me, you can see the front of the sub has these metal robot arms and a shelf filled with all different cool things that we can use to collect samples. And finally, the tool that we most routinely use is called a remotely operated vehicle. So the video on the left is ROV Jason, and it has a lot of similarities to Alvin. It has robot arms, it has a cool shelf with all our sampling gear, but Jason remains tethered to the ship. So that wire attached to Jason is always connected, and we pilot the ROV from this really cool control room on the vessel. The ROV has really nice cameras, so we can record video and we can get a really good visual on what the seafloor looks like. And then if you are into video games, you might be a really good ROV pilot because the pilots have these remote controls. They have something really cool that actually looks like the robot's arm, and you can activate it and move the arm around, and then you're moving Jason's arm around on the seafloor. So we can use those tools and those controls to pick up rocks, put them in our basket, and bring them back onto the vessel. In the top right is one of my sediment samples from a couple years ago. So we have these tubes that the robot arm can push into the mud and pull out a nice tube of sediment for us to study back in the lab. And then we take turns in this control room too. So the nice thing about the ROV is they can stay in the water for sometimes more than a day. And so we work in shifts going in and out of this control room, directing the pilots and collecting our samples. I'll end with the fanciest squid I've ever seen. So I study the seafloor, but it takes a while for these tools to get all the way down there. And I love sitting in the control room and watching all of these amazing animals that live in the dark ocean water. This is a squid that has only been observed on a few different occasions. it has a very fancy hat, and scientists still don't understand why. So it was a really exciting discovery on our latest expedition. So thank you all for listening.
All right, Katlin, thanks for that great presentation. And, I think it's a good lesson for students to think about. I'm sure in the classroom things don't always go as planned, but it's what you do after those things don't go as planned that matter, that you don't give up. You try to find another way, and it sounds like as soon as possible, you'll be getting back out in the field to do this expedition again.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll connect with you while you're out on it that time too.
Yeah, we love that.
All right, good stuff. We're going to have a little Kahoot quiz now together. I'm going to share my screen. Just take a moment to kick in. There we go. So today you want to go to kahoot.it. That's the website, kahoot.it. And then you want to go to your PIN number. It's going to ask you for a PIN. 520092 is our PIN number for today. So 520092. If you have something at your seat, like a tablet or a Chromebook, you could join that way. If not, your teacher can pop it up at the front of the room. You can shout out your answers to him or her. I already see some joiners here. If you don't have any technology to connect, just play along anyway. Shout out the answer and see how you do in our Kahoot quiz today. There is a little multiple choice, a little true and false. As always, the faster you put the right answer in, the more points you're going to get. So while we give a moment or so for some classrooms to come in or some students to come in and join us, Katlin, I've got a question here in the chat. What is it that attracted you to the ocean in the first place?
I grew up in Ohio. And so when I was a kid, I never really went to the ocean. I used to go to Lake Erie, and I always loved being by the water. And I did a lot of science fair as a kid. So I knew I liked being outside, and I knew I liked working with water and doing science. And so I kind of just stumbled into oceanography. The first time I got to go to sea, it was this really fun adventure. It was really interesting science. And so I was lucky to kind of stumble into something that was a really good fit for me.
All right. And you're lucky too, where you live in Santa Cruz is a beautiful spot to be close to the ocean for all kinds of activities, tide pooling, scuba diving, sea kayaking. I'm sure there's lots of stuff you can get up to.
Yeah, there's been a ton of whales in Monterey Bay lately. So you just go for a walk by the ocean and you can see them jumping and you can see their whale spouts. It's a good place to be an oceanographer.
All right, very cool. Well, it looks to me like things have slowed down, so I think we're ready to play our Kahoot. So let's hit that start button and let's see how we do today. Okay, first question coming your way. It is a true or false question. Expeditions always go 100% as planned. What did we learn today? Actually, I can see one of the classrooms in the backstage area, and they are absolutely right. Good job, third graders. I see what you're doing back there. You got it. So true or false, expeditions always go as planned. But a couple more seconds to get your answer in. All right. I didn't think we'd have too much trouble with that one. Yeah, very cool. So yes, expeditions don't go as planned. So you have to be flexible in the field, and sometimes they don't go at all. All right, fair enough. Let's see what we got here. The lively echidna is holding down that top spot. Our next question. This is multiple choice. How long can it take to grow a crystal on the sea floor? Was it about 10 years? Could it be hundreds of years? Could it be thousands of years? Or all the way to millions of years to grow a crystal on the sea floor? So 10 years, hundreds of years, thousands of years, or millions of years. A few more seconds. Oh, we had some lean towards hundreds, but Katlin, those crazy conditions, it's more like millions to get to the size, right, that you were interested in?
Yeah, for the nodules, it's millions, but those hot hydrothermal vents do grow a little bit faster. So it kind of depends on the type of crystal, but the ones that we were studying in Hawaii that grow to the size of a golf ball, those take millions of years.
All right. That puts the mystery pelican in first place. We've got another multiple choice coming your way. The rocks Katlin wanted to study are called, were they pebbles? Were they aggregates? Were they nodules? Or were they reefs? What was it Katlin was hoping to study out there on the RV Kilo Moana? Pebbles, aggregates, nodules, or reefs? About 3 seconds to lock something in there. All right, good job, crew. They were called nodules, forming around a little seed on the ocean floor. All right, Mystery Pelican, you got one more to hold on to. True or false? The galley is where you sleep on the ship. The galley. Is that where you sleep on the ship? True or false? The galley. About halfway there, you have 10 more seconds to get it locked in. The galley, is that where you sleep on the ship? All right, that is false. That's where you're going to go get breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks. The galley on the ship. Let's take a look at our podium. In third place, we've got the Dandy Panther. In second place, we've got the Purple Penguin. And holding down that top spot, ooh, the Mystery Pelican, holding on for those last few questions. All right. Well, thanks for playing Kahoot with us. Let's take that Kahoot quiz off of the screen, turn off that music, and let's do what we love to do, which is lots of questions. So if you're tuning in via YouTube, use the chat to send in some questions. I'm going to grab some camera classroom questions now as well, and we'll kind of go back and forth. So I want to start off with our third graders joining us in Illinois who are doing a perfect symbol backstage to say, no, expeditions do not always go as planned. You guys nailed it. Good job.
Yeah. Okay. And we were number one in the Kahoot. They're pretty happy. This is Pablo. He has a question.
How long is the sea? Yeah, how deep?
Do you want to take a guess? How many? I like to go ahead.
Maybe like 10 million deep?
That's a good guess. It's thousands of meters deep. So the deepest point in the ocean is almost 7 miles. Have you ever run 1 mile?
Yeah.
Okay, so imagine doing that 7 times. Think of how far that is. That's how deep it would take you to get all the way to the bottom of the deepest point in the ocean.
Yeah. I'm sure you guys know that Mount Everest is the tallest ocean in the world, or sorry, the tallest mountain in the world. But the Marianas Trench in the Pacific Ocean is deeper than the tallest mountain on Earth. That's pretty cool.
That is amazing. All right.
All right. You got another question on deck there? Grade threes.
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay. Let's see. Come on up. Anouk. We have as many questions as you can take.
We're happy to take questions.
How do ocean currents happen?
That's a really good question. So there are currents at the surface of the ocean, and those are influenced by the wind. So the way the wind is blowing kind of pushes that water around. But did you know that in the deep ocean, there are currents as well? So even in the deep ocean, the water's moving in different directions. And those currents are a little bit different, and they are controlled by the temperature of the water and by how much salt is in the water. So they're so deep that there's not really a big influence from the wind at the surface, but the salt in the water and the temperature causes that water to slowly move even down on the seafloor.
Thank you.
All right. We'll get a few more of those questions ready. We're definitely going to come back your way. We have some Fab 4-5s hanging out with us here in Canada. Let's see how they're doing today. How are we doing, West Rouge Junior Public School? How are we doing today?
Good.
Good.
Well, we have no visual, but okay. Go ahead.
That's okay. We hear ya.
Our question was, how long is the squid you guys discovered?
That's a really good question. That squid was probably about this big.
It's pretty big.
It's pretty big. It's funny working underwater. It can be really hard to tell how big something is. And so the ROV has 2 lasers, and you shoot these green lasers through the water, and you can control how far apart they are. So we use those lasers to measure the squid. That one was about this big.
Someone's computer is still open.
Very cool. Okay. Do we have another question on deck there from Miss Jenko's crew?
Go ahead. I think
biggest underwater sea creature there is?
But from the abyss.
Yeah,
That you discovered. Yeah.
that you discovered.
That's a good question. Well, I live close to the Monterey Bay Aquarium, and right now they have some spider crabs, which are probably as big as me. There are some really giant squid that live on the seafloor. There's some really big sharks. I haven't seen any giant animals on the seafloor, but they can be pretty big. The giant squids are like 3 or 4 of me put together.
Wow.
All right. Grade 4 or 5s. We'll check in with you in a few minutes, see if you have another question or two for us.
Yep.
But I'll grab a couple here from YouTube. So one question here is asking, how do you like the ocean? So I'm thinking that they're wondering, you know, what is it about the ocean that you like so much? What draws you to get into it and to want to know what's beneath it?
The ocean is the largest habitat on our planet, and it's so different in these different layers the deeper you go. So, you know, the first couple times I visited the ocean, I got to swim and do some snorkeling and see what's at the very top. And then when I started working in oceanography, you start getting into these deeper layers. So the middle of the water column is where we captured the photo of that beautiful squid. And then you keep going down all the way to the seafloor, and then you have these giant vent chimneys with tube worms and all kinds of different animals. So it's the largest habitat on Earth. I feel like there are so many different mysteries and things in, especially the deep ocean, that we haven't yet discovered. So it's the most exciting place in the world for me to explore.
All right. Another question here from the chat wondering, how many ocean expeditions have you been on?
Ooh, good question. Well, I'm going to count the last expedition because we were at sea for 1 day.
Yeah.
So that was expedition number 16. And I haven't counted how many days I've spent at sea in a while, but it's definitely over a year. And I've gotten to work all over the world. So I've done expeditions in the Arctic Ocean that went all the way to the North Pole. I've crossed the Atlantic Ocean, crossed big sections of the Pacific Ocean. I worked with a friend in the Mediterranean Sea. So 16 expeditions. And one of the coolest parts of my job is I get to go visit and explore places all over the world.
All right. Very cool. Well, let's check in with some camera classrooms, see if we have a few more camera questions. Let's go back to Illinois.
Come on
They
up.
are. I think we probably have 1 or 2 more questions here.
Go ahead.
What is the most common sea creature?
Ooh. The most common sea creature is probably unexpected, but probably bacteria in the ocean. So if you have a sample of seawater, it might look like this. It looks clear. It looks like nothing, but there could be millions of bacterial cells living in that water. And then there's a lot of fish species that are pretty common too.
Thank you.
All right. Great question.
We bring one more up?
Of course.
Okay, Noor, come on up.
How long did it take for you to go to the ocean and come back?
So sometimes, I mean, how long does it take me to get to the ocean? This was a 5-hour flight to get to Hawaii, and then we leave port. Sometimes we stay on the boat for a week or 2. Sometimes we live on the boat for 2 whole months. So we stay out on the ocean for a really long time to work in really remote places, really far away places. So it's important to have a comfy bunk bed.
Bye-bye.
And know where all those snacks are in the galley.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks for those great questions. Let's check in with our 4 or 5, see if they have another question or 2 for us.
Did I say it now?
Yeah, go ahead.
When you go in the HOV sub, do you have a difficult time with the pressure from the abyss?
That's a good question. There's so much pressure down there, but I don't actually feel any change in the pressure because we're protected in this titanium sphere. So there's a lot of engineering that goes into the design of the human operated vehicle, where inside as a human, you don't feel any of the pressure changes.
Okay.
How deep does that go?
So right now, the HOV that I showed can go down to 6,500 meters. So it kind of gets better with, kind of goes under refits, and they keep improving the sub and working on the sub. And as of a few years ago, can go down to 6,500 meters. I will say you don't feel the pressure in the deep ocean, but you do feel the temperature. So the deep ocean is so far away from any sunlight. It's completely dark. There's no warmth from the sun. And so the deep ocean is actually really cold, and there isn't a heater inside of the submarine. So you might be starting your dive in a place that's really warm on the surface, and on deck of the ship, you might be in a t-shirt. But if you're going down in Alvin, you have to pack a hat and warm clothing. And I bring like thick, warm socks because it's pretty cold in that sub when you get down to the deep sea.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, 4 or 5, great questions. Okay, before we take one more question from YouTube, I did get a message in the chat from our 3rd graders who say they have more questions. We'll give them a chance to squeak in a couple more questions.
Punchy, come on up. And let's see.
Do you know what the
Let's see.
squid that
I'm
you
gonna see
found the
remember
name
this.
is?
Asher?
I don't know the name. It has a very long scientific name, and it hasn't been observed that often. So sometimes when you see animals all the time, they get kind of common names that are easy to remember, like a sea cucumber, or there's something called a headless chicken monster, which is a really cool animal in the deep ocean. And that squid is so new that it doesn't have one of those fun names yet. It just has a long scientific name. I just like to call it the squid with the very fancy hat.
That could catch on.
Asher, go ahead.
What is your favorite animal in the ocean?
My favorite animal in the ocean is the mola mola, or the ocean sunfish. Have you heard of that?
Nope.
Anybody heard of that?
No.
It's really big, so it can be the size of your car, and it's really round like a big oval, and it's this giant fish, but its pectoral fins are really tiny. So it's kind of this big blob in the ocean with these tiny little fins, and it mostly just drifts around with the current and eats whatever's floating by. But oh yeah, thanks, Joe. This is the ocean sunfish, the mola mola. I've seen a baby mola mola in Monterey Bay, where I live. I've seen them in the open ocean too, but they're really interesting looking fish.
Thank you.
Pretty cool. All right, do you want to squeeze one more in before we take a final YouTube question?
Sure, Daniel, come on up. You want to go? We have as many as you can take.
So, like, what is the rarest fish that you found?
The rarest fish.
It's hard to tell in the deep sea, isn't it? Because we visited so few times that it's hard to know what's rare or what might be really common.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that this is rare, but something that I had never seen before until an expedition last summer is a giant tube worm. Have you ever heard of that animal?
No.
Okay, it's a really cool worm, and it can grow to be big. Like I got to hold it, and I had to use 2 hands to hold it, and it builds this kind of home. It builds this white tube, and then the worm lives in the tube. And it has kind of like those pom-poms we saw earlier. Yeah, it has these kind of red pom-pom things that it uses to grab food. They're only found at deep sea hydrothermal vents. So those rocks on the seafloor that form from really hot fluid. So you don't see them everywhere. This is definitely one of the coolest new things that I personally have got to see on a recent expedition.
Thank you.
All right. Good stuff, third graders. Full of really, really, really good questions. Thank you for those. Kayla, I think this is a great one to wrap up on today. If someone is curious or interested in a ocean exploration career, what advice would you have for them?
You can study any field of science to become an oceanographer. You don't even have to study science to go to sea. So some of the videos I showed you today were made by my friend Peter, who is a science communicator. So he goes out on the ocean and documents and helps share the work that we do. I showed you all of the cool robots that we use to study the deep ocean. Those are run by engineers and computer scientists. My background is in chemistry and biology, and now I do a little bit of geology. So the ocean is so vast and so complex that we need really smart scientists from all different fields and artists and communicators who can help us share that work. So whatever type of science or art that you're interested in, keep following that, and you might eventually end up out on the open ocean.
Whoops, I accidentally took myself out. That's really good advice, Caitlin. I remember being on board of the exploration vessel Nautilus, and there were ROV pilots and navigators and engineers and the cook, and the list just went on and on. Science communicators, videographers. There's so many careers you can be in and still be a part of ocean exploration. And I remember the cook was definitely one of our favorite members of the crew. Very important job on the ship. Oh, and our third grade class is wondering, can they send you more questions afterwards? Would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. Well, let's get a little noise here. We still have a few classrooms with us backstage. So I'm going to bring in, if you want to get a little bit loud, a big goodbye and thank you for being in.
Not okay. Ready?
Oh,
Go for it.
Okay, be good.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, everyone, for being with us today. Caitlin, thank you for being with us. I know the expedition didn't go as planned, but we can't wait to join you on whatever version comes together in the future. So thanks so much, Caitlin.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks, everybody.